Hi, this is Dr. Frank with the Church of Rational Truth. Today we are going to talk about the hot topic in physics right now, and that is the questionable, I would say, LK-99 superconductor. This has been all over the news. It is a big physics topic right now, whether or not this thing actually exists, whether it has the capabilities that it is purported to have, and more importantly, we're not going to talk so much about that because that's not really my foray, and that's going to be a very deep dive into the physics of it. We're going to talk more about the scientific method and reproducibility and the importance of reproducibility in the scientific method. And this is a perfect example of it. We have one group that hasn't even published a peer review paper out of Korea, I believe, that has initially made these statements about it, and they quickly published, even before being peer reviewed, a paper that was somewhat slapdash from what I've heard in reports. I've not read it myself, so I'm not sure. And now there's this kind of race to reproduce it. They are sending the details, the methods of making this out to many different laboratories all across the world, and many of them are trying their best to reproduce it and recreate this substance that is supposed to have these room temperature superconducting capabilities. I believe at the time of this recording, there was one group in China that said that it's got some what's it, dielectric or diamagnetic properties, but it does not have superconducting properties. But so far, many other people have been trying and haven't quite been able to make it. One of the issues, it seems like, is the methods that were published were very vague on the production of it. I think they didn't have the exact settings, the exact cooling temperatures or cooling rates, and that makes it very difficult to reproduce. Usually you want this like baking a cake. You want the exact steps, you want the exact timing so someone else can reproduce it. That is, I think, a very important part of the scientific method, because for something to be true, you have to be able to reproduce it. I think a lot of people, when they see one study, they automatically jump to a whole lot of conclusions based on a single study, and that is a big error. Studies can be flawed. Studies can come to wrong conclusions. There are even people who are less scrupulous who will even make incorrect data or make fraudulent data to try and support some claim without any actual real scientific backing. So for something to be proven true, you need to be able to reproduce it, and hopefully people who are not associated with the original paper should be able to reproduce it. So that's why it is nice to see repeat data. It's nice to see other people to do the same trial, even though you might say, well, that's redundant. The trial was already done. Why are we doing it again? It's because it is to try to pull out all those flaws that could happen in the original trial and to confirm it. It needs to be proven over and over again. If you can get 100 people to reproduce the same results, well, then it's probably true. It would be strange for 100 unrelated people to be able to come to the same conclusion, versus if it just one person is able to come to a conclusion, but no one else has the capability to reproduce that, well, that means that it's probably not true or something else is missing. So what we'll see as time goes on, hopefully someone will be able to reproduce the same data, but that's what the race is now. The race is to kind of confirm this. The problem with superconductors, especially room temperature superconductors, is this is kind of a holy grail or a huge thing in terms of physics, because it would be world changing. In our lifetime, we would see a massive change in the electricity structure, how things are produced, how efficient electricity is moved, and how efficiently devices can use electricity. It would be groundbreaking. So there is a lot of hype to be made, a lot of people to gain a lot of fame, potentially Nobel Prizes, for actually coming up with something that does this. So it's really important that we just don't all of a sudden gravitate towards this and say, oh my god, look at this amazing thing that we found. We need to first test it. We need to first be able to say, is this actually real? Can we reproduce it? And can we all follow the same methods to be able to produce that? This is why, for me personally, not necessarily what you see out in the scientific community, I like papers to much more focus on their methods and their raw data. The reason I like that is because if people go down to the T on their methods, it makes it super easy for someone to reproduce their study. If I know exactly how you got your data, I can apply that to my own data set and I can check your work. I like them to show all their raw data. because a lot can be done in terms of data analysis that can fudge the numbers. If you look at numbers a specific way, or you try to do a test that goes towards your conclusions instead of against your conclusions, you can really make numbers say things that they might not actually say. Versus if you publish an exact methodology, I'm just going to say method because I keep trying to be all fancy with it. If you publish an exact method down to as fine of a point for each step as possible, with I used this kind of oven, I used this amount of each material, I did it for this many minutes, at this temperature, at this amount of pressure, in this location in the world, that makes it very easy for someone to try to reproduce it. Versus if you add vagueness, or you don't say exactly how you did your method, well, then two different people are using all sorts of different methods. It makes it very hard to reproduce it. It makes it very hard to say whether someone's initial production was actually accurate or not. That is a big red flag when someone is publishing a method that's very vague, because then how is anyone to reproduce it? Why don't we have the exact methodology of it? Because you should be able to tell us exactly how you did this. So that is a little bit worrisome. That is why that is so much more important than I think even a discussion or a results section when you're reading a scientific paper. A lot is put onto the discussion and the analysis of the data, but really that's not as important. I think if you put out raw data and your procedure getting that raw data, that is much more important because people can draw their own conclusions directly from it. They don't have to do your analysis. They could do their own analysis. They could say whether an outlier should be removed or not. They could say what testing they're going to do on that data to see if they're coming to the same conclusion. But really nowadays there's so much that's based on the content of the article or the arguments made in the article, the conclusions made in the article. But really, that is very biasing. That is very much where a person who is writing it can push a narrative, and that's not what science is about. Science is about cold, hard facts. It's about getting to the truth and looking at the base numbers rather than interpreting those numbers and trying to introduce what you think is going on with it. If anything, you want to remove yourself as much as possible to get a good study. I think that's about it. Time will tell whether this is something that is a one-off, haha, that's not actually true, you published way too early and you didn't actually have what you thought you had, or if this is going to actually be groundbreaking and it will issue in a new era of superconductors. Time will tell. I really hope that it is legitimate and true, but I am incredibly cautious and I am going to wait until several people reproduce it, especially ones that are trusted sources. If that is the case, then by all means, I'm going to jump on that bandwagon, but until we have that, I'm going to remain very cautious. I would love to say cautiously optimistic, but I'm just going to say cautious because we have so little data yet, and there's already a lot of things to worry about with the initial paper. But that is it. We will see how it goes as time goes on. That's the end of this lecture. Sorry this is different than our usual lectures about, we've recently been doing ones about logic and reasoning, but this is about the scientific method, so I figured it would be a good one for us to cover. If there's anything else you want us to cover or anything you'd like to see, please let us know in the comments. I'm Dr. Frank with the Church of Rational Truth, signing off.